Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon, and today we have a very special guest, the author of the seminal work on masculinity, The Way of Men, as well as the equally excellent Becoming a Barbarian, A More Complete Beast, and most recently, Fire in the Dark. It is, of course, Mr. Jack Donovan. Thanks for doing the show, Jack.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've got so much to get into, and some of our audience may not be familiar with you, so I'll start with maybe a fairly straightforward question. In at least two of your books, you say that masculinity is now optional, and you give the example of hunting at one point, which used to be a necessity for survival and is now a luxury activity. And I immediately thought of Joe Rogan with his elk meat in some exclusive range, shooting deer with an expensive crossbow. But then the obvious question, and you do tackle it in the books, but the obvious question I wanted to start with is, if masculinity is now optional, why even bother to pursue it?
Well, masculinity is optional for society to survive in the world, right? But it's not, we're still the same animals that we've always been. And in the way that I always compare, when you talk about evolutionary psychology, I always talk about sex, because sex doesn't make any sense. If you're not doing it to reproduce, there's actually no reason to do it. It's kind of foolish and silly. It's a big waste of resources. But people want to do it anyway, because it's part of what it means to be human. And I think that masculinity for men is what it means, part of what it means to be human. It makes us happy. It makes us, it's part of our process of being better versions of ourselves, to become more masculine and to do some of these things that we are designed to do. We've been doing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So if you can say that something's not necessary anymore, but that doesn't mean that humans don't want to do it. I mean, we could survive on pills, I guess, but we still like to eat beautiful food. Like there are things that, are still part of being the human experience that I think are really important. Masculinity, I think, is one of those for men. And also, there's a little bit of it's optional on a regular basis in civilized Western societies when everything is going well. But if, the world is very unstable right now. And the idea that you'll never have to defend yourself, or you'll never have to defend the people around you, and you'll never have to do any of these things that men have to do, and you can just sit and type on a computer for the rest of your life, is not necessarily real. That's not how reality is working right now. I mean, if you could have said that to people in Ukraine a while ago, and they'd be having a very different reality right now. We're seeing war erupt in different parts all around the world, and if men are weak and defenseless, that really only benefits people who want to control them and to, exploit them. If they can stand up for themselves and operate by themselves independently, then they have a much better chance for themselves and their families.
Yeah, and as soon as the Ukraine war kicked off, we noticed people were trying to evacuate, and what did they do? They pulled every man under, I think it was 60 years old, out, and they said, you've got to go on the front lines, and suddenly we saw the reality of when you actually do need men in a pretty brutal way, as you point out.
Yes, we need, there's an old thing with warriors, that once you send them out to war, you don't actually want them back in the village because they're scary. They do things that you're not comfortable with, and so people have said that in different cultures throughout history, that there's a weird dynamic of getting warriors back into the society, and there's a little bit of the same thing with men. Like, men can be threatening, and so they don't want them around until they need them.
Yeah, exactly. But then when it all kicks off, we go back to the patriarchy. And another thing you said on this is that masculinity is not a mask just because we have to try it. This was very interesting to me, because this idea like, masculinity is a mask, and really we should be talking about our feelings and all that. And it's a good point. Like, why is it a mask just because we have to make an effort towards it? Because I didn't think of this growing up. I was in a fairly masculine environment because it was the north of England. And it was a state school and farmers' sons and stuff in the village, and so it was a set of masculinity that maybe wasn't an ideal version. But then when you leave that, you sort of go into the feminized culture, and you don't really think about it. And it took me years to even think about it again and start going back to the gym, whatever it is, lifting weights or playing football or whatever it is that I do now. But I just didn't consciously think about it. And so that's what I thought when I read that. Like, just we have to make an effort. Why does that make it inauthentic? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, we have to, everything that you have to do in life that's actually worth doing, you have to make effort to do. If you're going to paint a big painting, or sculpt a big sculpture, or build a company, it takes a lot of effort. That doesn't make it inauthentic, right? I think basically the way masculinity has been looked at for the past 50 years or so is through the lens of women, and they want to make they want to make men more like women, and they treat men like defective women, and so everything is put in that space, and unfortunately, with men now. You run into a problem with. Sorry, I was choking there a little bit, but you run into a problem with men are being judged as women instead of as men, and that's the frame for all of this. And this mask of masculinity that was referring to is actually kind of a feminist trope that they've trotted out for years and years. And every once in a while, like every 3 years, you'll see some guy write some ghost written book, some celebrity write some ghost written book, like the mask of masculinity. It's like this theme that they go over, like that men are fake and women are real. Is basically is what that's saying. Men are fake and women are real, and the reality is that I think that this control of emotions, which has been really important to men throughout history, has to do with the role that they've had to take in society. If you're going to be a leader, you actually have to control your emotions a little bit. You can't just like let's talk about our feelings and just cry all the time, because people will look to you for leadership. And that's true whether you're a father or whether it's true, whether you're a head of state or whether you're leading a company. Emotional control is really important because your emotions actually affect the people around you. And so the idea that we shouldn't, control them and be a little bit more stoic, I think is very foolish.
Yeah, that's always the thing they trot out. Men should be talking more about their emotions like women, basically, as you say, because now masculinity has entered the mainstream. We have a journalist in this country, sort of feminist, sort of Guardian type journalist, Caitlin Moran, and she has just now finally written a book on masculinity. And of course, it's awful and absolutely clueless. It sounds like she's never met a man, and the ones that she has met all read the Guardian and have low testosterone. So it's kind of like, it's absurd, but they're having to finally reckon with it because of Andrew Tate and things like this, because they can't ignore it anymore. This is my take. But their answers are always incredibly embarrassing and ridiculous. But they are finally having to sort of tackle it. But so far, they haven't grasped it at all, because like you say, they just see us as defective women.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're coming off of years of theory written by women. It's women thinking about what they don't like about men and then writing it down, and that becomes what masculinity is in the theory of like gender studies and all these things. Because how many actually masculine men are actually studying that and making that their career path? Like none. So the entire field is basically what women think about men. So it's kind of ridiculous. It's not. If men wanted to know what masculinity was, they would look to someone who they respect as kind of an exemplar of masculinity, right? They'd be talking to, as I have I've been really lucky over my career. I've got to talk to tons of, everything from UFC fighters to Navy SEALs and all the special operations guys and all that. And, their idea of masculinity is very similar to what I wrote in The Way of Men. And that's what most men would look at. And that's why you see people attracted, like you said, to Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate looks very confident. And he looks like confident, and he has a direction, and people gravitate, especially men, gravitate towards confidence. He's strong. He does exactly what he wants to, and he says exactly what he wants to, and people gravitate towards that. And if you have this other guy who's on the other spectrum of masculinity that feminists are like lifting up as their exemplar of what men should be, and he is always apologizing, and he's always backing up, and he's always and he doesn't look very physically imposing. He doesn't look like he could actually do anything. He's just saying words. Young men especially aren't going to respond to that. Because that's not the highest version of what they could be. The highest version of what they could be and what they want to become. They want to separate themselves from the mother and the womb and all this and become this different thing that they are. And to become that, it takes work and effort, as we were talking about, and you to become stronger and to become more competent physically and also mentally in all these realms. And, to have this guy who just looks over to a feminist to ask him what to say, men don't respect that.
No. And it's completely absurd. And what is your take on Tate, since we brought him up so early? So I'm on sort of good terms with Tate, on DM terms with him. He follows me on Twitter, nice. Now X. And some people think this means that I support absolutely everything he says, and they send me reviews on my podcast saying, "Oh, this guy supports Tate, who has a bad take on Palestine, and gives me 1 star." I'm like, this guy's completely mad. And some conservatives message me, "How can a Christian conservative support Tate?" But I support him in the broad sense, and at least it's a broadly positive message, about masculinity. Although conservatives do have criticisms of him, obviously. And we had Will Nolan on the podcast who claimed that Tate was a feminist because he promotes promiscuity. That was an interesting take. But I've heard all sorts of critiques. But what is your overall take on the Tate phenomenon?
Well, I mean, I've been doing this since before Tate was doing it. So I've gotten to see that kind of rise up. And I've been talking about masculinity in the same way for a really long time. And, Tate is, like I said, he exhibits competence. And he, for all intents and purposes, if the way of men is the way of the gang, Tate has a gang. He has a very large group of men that he influences, and I've met some of the men who have been out to visit him and hang out with him and so forth, and some of them are really accomplished men. That he doesn't have all just like losers who like look up to him. He has some very accomplished men who look up at him too. I don't keep track of everything that he says or does because I have my own take. I try to not be polluted by other guys' ideas who are in this space because I want to make sure that I have an original voice. Like I don't listen to like Jordan Peterson a lot because I was writing about this before Jordan Peterson. So I'm just going to keep saying what I'm saying and not I don't want to be derivative, So while I see Tate from afar, and I think that compared to a lot of the super conservative Christians and whatever, we probably have more in common than they do. But, obviously, as you said, I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says because I actually am a grown man who has a mind of his own.
Yeah, fancy that. Yeah. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I was watching Tate for years, so I already had a take on him way before the mainstream discovered him. And I guess you're even prior to that, you were even talking about this stuff and writing about it. I think Way of Men is 2012, wasn't it? So, yeah, you were way ahead of the game on that. So, yeah, it must be kind of annoying in a way for people just to discover all this stuff now. But you talk about the gang. You just mentioned the gang there, so I might skip to my gang questions. You talk about the gang as the, what do you call it, the kernel of masculine identity. And there's loads we could say about this, but maybe just for the audience and the listener, what is it you mean when you talk about the need for a gang?
Well, I think men's identity comes from being accepted and respected by other men. And that has a deep evolutionary, I think, basis. That's the way we've survived for most of human history, is that men needed a group. We're cooperative hunters. We're not these guys who like went out into the wilderness by themselves and survived and then found a wife and drug her by her hair and like had some babies. I mean, that's not actually how human societies have ever worked. What you had is a collective of men are collective hunters and fighters. So men have always worked in these teams. And that's why, like when I said, I talked to like special forces guys and so forth, they work in very small teams and they're like, yes, this is exactly how we operate. And that's been very gratifying to hear that because that's how human males have interacted for a really long time. And that doesn't mean that women are important and that children are important. And sometimes people characterize my work as being like everything's about being in a little hunting and fighting gang. And that's ridiculous. And that's not what I've ever said. But we do get a big part of our sense of self and identity and worth from being validated by other men. And people always say you could never care about what anybody thinks, and everyone who says that is a liar. Like everybody cares about what someone thinks. You can't care what everyone thinks, but you should care about the men who you respect and what they think of you, because that's a little bit of a check for you as well. Because we can all do crazy things, and I always say when honor comes up, when we talk about the concept of honor, it always means doing something you probably don't actually want to do. When your honor is invoked, this is about your honor. It really means that you're about to like do something that you probably don't want to do, but you're going to have to do because you believe that you should. In the context of a group or in the context of what you believe is good or right. So I think you have to. All these things are very important, and to have men around you who you respect and who respect you. That makes men feel really confident and grounded. And if they don't have that, they feel very nervous and insecure. And you can tell that if you have guys who are like in groups of men who they've made their way up through the ranks and found their place in them and whatever. They're more confident and grounded. And these guys who are living by themselves, have no friends, whatever, they're the guys on the internet, like yelling, just screaming on the internet. Well, actually, like, and like they have to fight with everybody in the world because they're hiding in their basement, like or at their apartment or whatever. So,
yeah. I quite often joke on the podcast that I live on my own and have no friends, so you've kind of outed me there as I think
So you got to work on that.
Yeah, I do have some friends, but that's kind of a joke, but I definitely live on my own. And I do think I've actually suffered from this kind of atomization. I do think, it's partly why I'm interested in all this stuff. I don't think I'm like living it. I think I'm aspiring to it. But, and I have little things
that's
like...
how everything starts.
Yeah. But it's hard to get a gang. I've got my five-a-side football group, real football, by the way, and it's like... So soccer, and we that's good, but it's like they're all politically, they're kind of, except for one guy, they're like the enemy, they're like the professional managerial class. In this country, we call them Remainers. They voted to remain in Brexit, and they're kind of BBC, certain financial institutions, liberal think tanks. So they're kind of just the area I live in, super left area. So it's kind of like they're good guys, but they're not really my gang. But we play the football, and that's great. But that's not really... Tate has the war room you talked about. You've got your own groups, I think. And so, yeah, people do need to do this. And by the way, just quickly on Honor, while I remember that, we should bring back Honor. I was saying to my mate yesterday, we should bring back duels. Like you insult me in the pub, so tomorrow we have to shoot each other with pistols at noon or something. That was a great idea, duels. Kind of had its flaws. A lot of people died. But
definitely, I'm glad in many ways that if someone calls me a name in public, I don't have to fight them tomorrow. Like that's because especially with the internet, man, you wouldn't make it very long at all.
True.
People call me names on the internet all day long. I'm glad I don't have to duel all of them to defend my honor.
Yeah, you're right. The text moved on. I demand satisfaction tomorrow. Yeah, 100 guys just shoot you. Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah, so that's an evolution. But when I think about the gang, there's there's more things I want to ask about it that are kind of bigger questions. But in pragmatic terms, I wonder sort of what it means, because I was listening to my friend Carl Benjamin do a speech the other day, and he was talking about consciousness raising. He was saying that in the 1960s, feminists got together in little private groups, and really they were just talking about their issues and kind of raising them. And that's apparently where the phrase "the personal is the political" came from in 1960s feminism. They said, well, what's the point of us doing these groups and just chatting about our problems? Like, no, we're consciousness raising. Is that sort of part of the idea of a gang, that men just getting together talking about these things is itself a kind of political movement?
Well, and that's why they don't want men to get together. They don't want men to be in unsupervised groups without women watching them, or without people telling them what they should and shouldn't say and whatever. Because I believe that men getting together in groups is actually the seed of where culture comes from. And I often joke that culture is actually just an inside joke. As soon as you get guys together, they start to create inside jokes, and other people don't understand them, and it just kind of snowballs from there. They become, after a while, you're talking about things and no one knows what you're saying. You can see that with internet chats and things like that. It'll become very self-referencing. And I think that, men do start to hash out ideas. And hashing out ideas is political. Talking about ideas and what we should do in life. What is good? What is best? What is better? How is best to live? That's what... I just recently went to Greece. And... got to visit the sites where Plato taught and where Aristotle taught, and they taught in gyms. They taught in places where young men and men got together and talked about ideas, and that's what we've always been doing. And it's fascinating to me to see this happening today, because a lot of the guys who are actually talking about these ideas now, let's go back and look at philosophers and so forth, are guys who are either kind of muscle guys who goes to the gym, or the guys who are talking about ideas today are often, I talk to men at jiu-jitsu. After an open mat, we'll try to kill each other for like 5 minutes, and then so what do you think about this? And we'll start talking about ideas. And that's an old form that I think men have been doing for a long time. So when men get together and talk about things, there is a political aspect to that, because obviously when we talk about what is good, we're talking about what we believe should be done. And what laws should be and so forth. So it all follows from that, but doesn't mean every group is necessarily a political group either.
Do you think there's an issue in reaching the kind of normie man? You talk there about, you're saying it's coming out of just geeks on the internet. Because one paradox I thought, not paradox is a bit strong, but a kind of contradiction is that the men talking about masculinity are quite often internet geeks because it's not a mainstream topic in a way. And then there's guys like you who are not, you couldn't really call a geek, but like you said, there's more strong guys getting involved. There's the Tates. But then you've got a sort of normie man who is the kind of beleaguered sort of family man. I'm sure they're happier than me, actually, and they're having, they've got families and they're doing all right, but they're in the feminized culture and they haven't really questioned it. And they say things like, oh, I'll have to check if I'm allowed to come to football tomorrow night. I'm like, allowed? And so that kind of thing baffles me, but maybe, they would probably look at my life and say that it's kind of bleak. But is there an issue of getting through to the normal man who by nature is kind of swimming in the culture of a feminized culture?
Well, I think that's happening more and more. When I first started writing about masculinity, it was probably in 2008, 2009, something like that. When I was writing about masculinity for a mainstream audience, almost no one was doing it. You had like pickup artists and men's rights activists, and a lot of them were just internet nerds, and that was the way it was. But now you really don't have that. We've transcended that to the point where I think masculinity is under such a big threat that you can't pretend that it's not there anymore. I think when people were overseas for the war on terror, and when in 2010, 2012, 2014, men could kind of insulate themselves, especially if you were in a very masculine part of the country or a very masculine like group. You could pretend, well, that's not around me. But now when you got to the point where people were talking about transitioning their sons, and you're having all this mainstream discussion about masculinity every day that they can't get away from, I think a lot of men have come to the forefront and started talking about it. You don't just have weird internet guys and guys like me who are just talking about ideas and theories. And I've if you can look at older pictures of me, and I've changed a lot over the years from talking about that. I mean, it's a personal transformation. As you said, it starts out aspirationally, but now you have guys like Jocko Jocko going on Rogan, and you have all these guys talking about masculinity in a much more present and way, in a way that they're actually looking at what's happening in society and actually talking about it now. Whereas before, if you talked about masculinity in like 2010, you were a weirdo. Like no one wanted to. Everybody's like, "What? We know what it is. What are you talking about?" And now I think the sense of urgency is there, especially with the rise of someone like Jordan Peterson. He's been a huge influence as well. And then, like you said, Tate and all those other guys. But really, I mean, Jordan Peterson was a big guy who influenced a lot of young men, and they realized that they need to look at what being a man actually means. Yeah.
And he was hated just for raising that initially in a very moderate way. And people were like, oh, shut up. Why is he crying? I mean, it was a bit weird that he was crying, but it was like,
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Peterson basically gives normal, good dad advice. Yes. That's what he does. Straight. He's just a father figure to a lot of men.
Yeah, but he did show, obviously, his popularity, as you say, showed the need and the desperation that, as you say, perhaps wasn't quite as clear in 2010. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the gang, though, it actually goes much further than that. It's not just getting together in groups. It's actually like a whole mindset where you're kind of, as I interpret it, beholden to a small group and accountable to a small group rather than the mass of people. And this is a key difference. And it comes up in this Becoming a Barbarian, which I'm annoyingly only halfway through. But you sort of mock individualism, a kind of gap year individualism, like finding yourself, who am I, and going to India or whatever. And you talk about social identity is meaning. Identity is everything. Tribal identity is everything that matters. So you're very big on that. And it's very much like, so we have nationalism versus globalism. And you're sort of going one further and saying, no, it's actually a smaller group. And you're only accountable to that group and not the wider culture.
Yeah, and I would say Becoming a Barbarian is a book where I was, having that argument with myself in many ways, because I'm one of the most individualistic guys that you will ever meet. I'm a weird guy, I do a lot. I'm an artist, and all the things that I like are things that most people don't like. So I'm a very individualistic guy, and I'm a thinker. So if I don't agree with you, I don't agree with you, and that's how it is. And so it was me struggling with myself a little bit, that book. But I do think there's a lot of value there in terms of who you're actually accountable to. There's something I wrote about in that book about we, and people use the word we in this very, very, the royal we. It's this very broad we. And who do you speak for? Who are you really like authorized to speak for as we? And nobody. Most of you, most of us, nobody. Like who authorized you to say, well, we think this? Who are you talking about? Who's behind you? So and we and I just did it there. When people talk about society, they say we. Well, society is full of a whole bunch of group of people that don't agree with each other on almost anything, and we tear each other's eyes out given the chance. So what is that? And globalism is just one step further. Like everyone is one, everyone is the same. But you can't. There's a guy who wrote about this limit to human. How many people we can actually understand in our lives. Yeah. How many people we can actually maintain meaningful relationships with, and it's not many. Whether it's 150 or 250 is questionable, but you really can't care, like authentically really care about more than 100, 200 people, to maintain a meaningful relationship with them. So the idea that we care about these things that happen to strangers, it's all very programmed, and it's all very you're like in a way that you're being basically shown a movie about in the way that a movie can make you cry even though the characters aren't even real. You're being shown about a movie about things that happen somewhere, and you're like, they're now cry about this. And the reality is that terrible things happen everywhere, all the time, every day. But you're being told to cry about this thing. And I think it's really helpful to people to dial back out. It makes people crazy. Like if you look at people are on Twitter, X, whatever, they're on the internet and they're looking at all these. All this news constantly, this constant influx of news, and it makes them crazy because they're being asked to care about people they don't know all the time, and how much energy they have left for the people that are in their actual circles. They're taking that energy. So I think that, you should be more accountable to the people who actually know and have interaction with, and people who are in your community. It doesn't have to be a gang, but the people who are in your broader community, like they should be more important to you than strangers that are really just numbers far away because you have no interaction with them. You have no connection to them. So I think that I love small governments and small groups more than anything because I think that they're self-policing a little bit better. But when you have these big centralized systems of control, what you have is people far away from you who don't care about you making decisions about your life. And that's, if Bob is down the street and Bob is messing up your life because he's on the town council, you can go have a conversation with Bob. But if Bob is so insulated from you that you like, he doesn't really even know what you are, like how can he make decisions for you? I mean, I think that's something that we're seeing now more and more.
Yeah. And that's kind of decentralization. Yeah, as you say, it's very hard to cry about someone in a totally foreign country, unless you're Jordan Peterson. He could probably manage to. he seems to cry a lot. But sorry, Jordan Peterson. We love Jordan Peterson. I don't know why I'm having a go at him. But on that point. So on a more sort of philosophical part of that, we've had people like Andrew Joel on here who very much is standing up for liberalism, but you've sort of rejected the universal values that liberalism claims exist. And you sound a bit more like Carl Benjamin, who was on here, and he talked about something called postmodern traditionalism, which he had invented, which meant that he accepts the radical subjectivity that the left claims. So, I'm perceiving the world in a certain way, and that's valid, and you can't say it's not. He goes, okay, fine, but then you have to recognize my culture or tribe, which in his case, he was calling it the English. So in England, we like free speech, fair play, cups of tea, whatever it is. And that's our tribe. He was saying, well, you have to acknowledge me on that basis. And so I was wondering where you stood on that. It sounded something a little bit like that you were talking about, because you were certainly, the liberal approach is to reject identity politics, right? And say, it's about the individual, it's about whatever shared values we all have. But the identity politics approach is obviously the opposite. And you've sort of really doubled down on that in that book. And you're saying identity is everything. And one more really interesting point you make is that they've started with white people or white men, but eventually they'll come for everyone's identity.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's identity is up for grabs. I mean, people don't want you to have your own specific group unless you're very controlled. Like Islam is okay as long as you're the right kind of Islam and you're saying the right kind of thing. It's not like okay if you're not saying the right thing. And the same is true with every other group. I mean, in America we have if black people are not Democrats,
You
they
ain't
are
black.
they're in trouble. They're said they're not black anymore. Like so they're not allowed to have their own views unless they're only special and loved by that particular establishment if they're saying what they're supposed to be saying, which like they're just it kind of makes them slaves. In the same way that any group that if you can't say what you actually mean and you can't like leave a group, what are you? If you can't go out on your own and say, hey, I don't agree with you anymore, then what are you? So I think that postmodernism is an interesting thing. And I actually have a guy who's in my group, Christopher Robertson, who's a really, really smart guy. And we were talking a lot about postmodernism yesterday and what it really means and who came up with the ideas of it. And liberalism is an interesting thing, too, between America and Britain and what it means in Europe and what it means elsewhere and what it's meant for all of its history. There's a very strange history there of what that means to a lot of different people. And America basically means you're a communist.
Right. Yeah, I didn't mean that one.
Yeah, I mean, really, I would consider myself a classical liberal, maybe. In terms of, America was a liberal nation. Like we wanted to not have kings and have certain freedoms. And so I think that was, I'm very much for that. I'm a free speech guy. And so, that's a liberal value, historically speaking. So, it's difficult to kind of figure out where you sit in all that.
Yeah.
But I do think that people need to be able to make their own mistakes and have their own weird, crazy little group with its own little weird, crazy ideas. And the idea that we're all going to share the same ideas and live as one always requires genocide. The idea that everyone's going to agree about everything always requires mass murder. And every time it's brought into, it's like, okay, the entire country of Russia or China is going to believe the exact same thing. Well, a lot of people are going to get murdered because that's not the way humans operate. Humans are tribal beings. And the great thing about humanity is no matter what kind of group you start, if it gets big enough, eventually it will splinter and a bunch of guys will like go off and be like, well, no, we're not really on the same page as that. If you look at Christianity, you could say that Christians believe X, but it's always a no true Scotsman argument. Like, well, one Christian will say, well, he's not a real Christian because he doesn't believe this. And because Christianity splintered into 1,000 little movements and they all disagree with each other and some of them, again, tear each other's eyes out. But that's what humanity is. And I think we're at a place where in the world where we see this kind of transhumanist movement where people want to escape humanity, go beyond what human is. And in this way that sounds Nietzschean but isn't. They want to become better than humans, but they mean becoming computers or becoming like transhumanists. And I think that I would have to say that I'm on the side of being human. I think that we have to understand that humans have a nature and embrace that. Masculinity, the fact that men and women are different is part of human nature. The fact that humans are tribal and they're going to break up into groups of people who disagree because they need to assert their own identity and their own importance in some way, that's very human. And they're going to keep doing it. And so, like, if we can look at the world realistically and say humans have a nature and operate accordingly, I think we're in a much better situation than if we say that everyone has to believe the exact same thing always, because people are going to disagree and then the people who disagree get targeted. Yeah. And that becomes this game. And every time it's been implemented, it requires a lot of violence to make everyone agree on the same thing.
Yeah. No, yeah, well, I'm definitely agree with that. I mean, that's the sort of leftist top-down approach. Whether it's communism or fascism, it's the top-down, rationalistic, everyone, ultra-rationalist, perhaps, idea. Everyone must follow this certain scheme.
People always say I'm a fascist, and I'm like, no, I hate them both equally. Like, right. I think that anyone who made it through 2020 and they still says they're a fascist is crazy.
Yeah.
Like you literally just saw what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
like, oh, when people tell you you can't leave your house,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that's
The government's in
and
league
what
with
you
big
can do and where you can
corporations.
go and all that. I mean, any totalitarian society, I'm like a hard no on.
Yeah.
Again, because I want to be able to make my own choices in life, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the government in league with big pharma corporations demanding you stay in your home. It looks a little bit like fascism, but yeah, you couldn't
Yep.
tell them that at the time. Although, of
Yeah, yeah.
course, obviously no one, obviously I didn't have the vax, but we don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. But I have one more question about the identity stuff though, from the Becoming a Barbarian book. So you've talked about identity over individualism, but you talk about the empire of nothing in that book. It's one of your kind of famous inventions, not inventions, but interpretations of the globalist culture that we have now, kind of corporate globalism or something like that. And one point you made, you said that you basically said moral universalism is necessary for global trade. That's kind of the idea that everyone needs to be the same so that they can sell stuff to everyone across the world. That's pretty much your argument. But I started to wonder there, is it really about just money? Because we've seen, for example, woke corporations where they're more concerned about their ESG score than the bottom line. Then again, when the bottom line gets too ropey, they start to panic, like Bud Light, or we've just seen Victoria's Secret has just decided to have attractive models again because the fat models aren't working and they've lost so much money, which is kind of hilarious. But I'm just tackling this idea because you could argue that wokeness itself was not universal, so that was where they went wrong, and then they return and retreat to something more universal to win back the shareholders. But I'm trying to figure out what's going on there because I'm not totally convinced it is just commerce. There seems to be a deeper ideology that's like, even if we lose money, we want to push this ideology. Or are you right because going woke is what loses them the money and then they retreat to something more universal? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and that is interesting. Obviously, that's happened since I wrote that book.
Right.
But a lot of that but I think that it facilitated commerce. Globalism really, a lot of the mentality that came from was there to facilitate commerce. Like we're all the same. We have to be able to hire people in Beijing and America and whatever, and they have to be able to get along. And if they have the same cultural values, then that works better. I do think that makes a lot of sense. But when you come down to the woke thing, that seems to be a different agenda. It's neo-communist, but I think it has nothing to do with what the people with the money want. It has to do with the people. It's kind of for the little people.
Yeah.
I think woke is kind of a distraction for the little people. It's kind of a religion for the people, whereas people, like the people with real money don't care about those. The little blue-haired ladies screaming in the street about whatever, about who's social justice or whatever. They don't care about that person. They don't care about social justice. Clearly, they don't care about justice at all. They care about advancing their interests. And so, yeah, I just think woke is kind of like I said, a religion for the masses. And as far as whether it makes the ESG scores or go up or down, well, isn't that? I'm not a financier, and I am pretty much financially illiterate, but it seems as though they care about those scores because it has to do with their ability to borrow money and all these other things that are like very important to these companies in their long-term survival. And so, like, they lose a little here, they gain a little here, they lose a little here. I don't think the people in power care about these ideas at all. I don't think they care about equality and social justice or any of that. I think that those are things that they're using to influence different things that are happening in the world. It's very unconvincing. You just have the people like in the mainstream. I think the little people who are really devoted to these ideas.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it probably came about because of Occupy Wall Street, the post-2008 crash. They were like, oh no, we need to appease these people somehow. Let's give them this, something about diversity. And then you got these people at Disney claiming they're biromantic asexuals, and they're the ones writing the movies. But then someone at the top in the board goes, what have we done? We've ruined Star Wars. And it's like, yeah, you let these people get carried away with this stupid thing you gave them. And so, yeah, that makes more sense. And the idea that globalism really is just about money, but now it's under threat, and in the sort of with China being sort of too hostile, we're going to have a very different world where we can't really be globalists anymore. It's going to be, because I talked to Doug Stokes, who's a professor who wrote a book called Against Decolonization. And he's pointing out it's going to be a new world order. It's going to be less globalism, and we're going to have to be much more clear about our values because we're not going to be trading with China as much, and so on. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But I can't remember what question it pertains to, but that's just a note from me. So I really wanted to ask, because you mentioned Christianity just briefly there and how it descends into different groups. I did want to ask about the kind of morality of your books. And I know you have Christian fans, and we've had loads of Christians on here, and we do a series on the Bible as well with a vicar, so it gets very Christian on here. But your books are not exactly Christian. You're very influenced by Nietzsche. It's a very different kind of moral landscape. So there's a few things I wanted to ask about with this. So in A More Complete Beast, you actually claim that Christian ideas of heaven and hell are a kind of revolutionary ressentiment or ressentiment, the Nietzschean word. And Scruton talks about that in How to Be a Conservative. It basically means resentment. It's like a kind of victim mentality or zero-sum game of the left. I don't have something because someone else has it. You talk about it in terms of Nietzsche's Slaven morale. I think it's called the slave morality. And you say, I'll just read this interesting passage you have here. You say anti-noble man, and you basically mean the Nietzschean slave morality, whatever you want to call it, slave mentality. He doesn't mean literally slaves, but we all know that on this podcast. So you say anti-noble man has resigned himself to a happiness that can only come in the afterlife or after the tables have been turned and the evil, powerful people have exchanged places with the good, powerless people. In a religious context, the good, powerless people convince themselves that they will be rewarded in heaven while they vengefully fantasize about the eternity of pain and suffering that their foes, the evil, powerful people, will be forced by their righteous God to endure in hell. So you're basically, in this world, Christianity is a kind of leftism, victimhood, or something like that.
Well, I mean, it's I think, and I'll get a lot of flack for this, and this is fine. But I mean, to me, it's woke 1.0, and I think that woke, what we're seeing now is a new religion. Really, woke is a religion. And it's very much a religion of resentment. Like the people who have power shouldn't have power. The people who they'll get theirs in the end. After the revolution comes, they'll get theirs in the end, and so forth. And it's a very anti-human, anti-life thing. And Christianity is, like I said, there's so many different takes on what Christianity is and what it really means. My thing with Christianity is obviously I have just never been a Christian. I was raised Catholic, but not for very long. And, so I've had exposure to it, but it just has no appeal to me aesthetically or philosophically. And I just don't believe it's real. And I see it in the big scope of all the other religions in the world. I'm like, well, that's kind of what my solar idealism that I advance is about. That's my philosophy. And the idea is that, well, we see all these other religions around that time in that region, all these other things that have developed that have similarities. I think it's more useful to look at the similarities between all these religions than to say, this one thing that happened in this one place at this one time is the absolute truth, and all these other things are lies. And that just seems ridiculous to me. So I avoid that, but at the same time, obviously I have tons of Christian fans, and the reason why is that whatever I think of Christianity and its relationship to masculinity, men still want to be men, no matter where they are and no matter what religion they ascribe to, whether they're Muslim or Christian or atheist or whatever. Men still want to be men. And they still, so there are masculine men of every single religion that's ever existed in the world. And so they respond to the ideas in my work that are consistent with their experience as men. And Thomas Carlyle actually had some really good words about it. I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's something like, you can have a man of any single creed, and his worth or worthlessness is, not dependent on that creed at all. He'll be a good person or a bad person, or a strong man or a weak man. And it's really almost not related to that question at all. So like I said, I have many Christian fans, and I like having them, but I mean, I'm not a Christian, and so I have to be honest about that as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, we have a lot of Christians, but we also have people who don't like the Christian podcast, so we'll annoy someone with whatever we say. But just on this same theme, you talk in The More Complete Beast. You said the beast who is able to avoid the trap of resentment moves beyond good and evil. The noble beast wants everything that looks delicious. At that point, I just thought, is it hedonism? But then you said as well, no act is evil, but the consequences may be undesirable. There is no good or evil, only actions and consequences. And I thought, is that any different from the kind of satanic Aleister Crowley, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law? Is this roughly what you're advocating, or is it different?
No, I've never been a big Crowley fan. There is a little bit. I can see where you'd see an overlap there, but more it'd be more Nietzschean than Crowleyan. Most of that obviously comes from Nietzsche, and I think that humans, like I said, live in gangs and they live in communal societies, and you don't just do whatever you want in a communal society. I mean, your actions have consequences. And that's what I was trying to say. There is that, yes, your actions have consequences. So yeah, you can do whatever you want. Maybe it's not bad, but you're going to be judged in a certain way. People are going to think of you in a certain way. It's going to change the way people look at you, depending on what you do. And so you have to be aware of that as well. And I honestly came up with that the actions not consequences part of that book because I was having a discussion with a guy who was in a tribe with me at the time who wanted to do some things that I knew the tribe wouldn't like. And I was like, hey, listen, kid, you can do that thing. And I don't really think what you want to do is that wrong. But the guys are going to have some opinions about it. So you better be ready to deal with that if you do that. And so yeah, I think that actions do have consequences, and do whatever you want means that they don't almost. Yeah, I mean, if you want to sit and live in an opium den with hookers, then you kind of know what's going to happen to your life. That's not really the best practice. I don't like hard and fast rules. I like best practices in terms of morality. Like what works out for most of the people most of the time, what produces the best result, and they're different for different kinds of people who are in different kinds of things. We were just reading a lot of Aristotle recently in our group, and that virtue ethics, I think, comes into play there. And the idea of what is good for this guy who is a construction worker is not necessarily a good guy. What is good for this, office worker, there's a little bit of a difference there. And what their version of good has to be, and to be good at being what they are, it requires a little bit of a different mentality and a little bit of different behavior. So I think that there's so much nuance in human behavior, and I think that when we break everything down to simple, commandments of this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad. It's almost like mandatory minimum sentencing in legal terms. No matter what they did or what the extenuating circumstances are or whatever else happened, this person did this, and so that they get this punishment. Whereas I think that if you really dig into the whys, and I think that's where we need human judgment. Like I said, I think when men can have human judgment and their experience in life and say, hey, well, I can see why that happened, so we'll handle this a little bit differently. And I think that that's important. I think that that's our agency. Men, and when we break things down in society to nothing but kind of programs like scripts, like if this happens, then that should happen, then we are losing a little bit of our humanity and our own sense of judgment and agency.
Yeah. So you don't ascribe to a kind of universal morality. You're talking more about an empirical approach where don't do that because in reality it will lead to bad outcomes, but there's nothing inherently wrong with it, is what you're claiming. But actually, the second part.
So many of our things that are worked in other societies before us don't work now because there are so many different things going on. Humans are always the same. We're basically the same animals that we've been for a really long time. But a lot of the variables around us in our environment have changed, or the social environment has changed. In my book, I don't have, I don't believe in kind of putting women up on a pedestal because we're in a society where that they do nothing but that all the time. So that's not, as a counterbalance to that, I don't need more of that. Whereas in ancient Athens, to have a whole city named after the goddess Athena, and to have that be your highest pinnacle of of that city, that would seem unnecessary today in a feminist world. If you're going to help men, you don't need to elevate women any more than they're already elevated. So,
Yeah.
what we need at this time is different from what we needed then. And so, as long as you keep this idea of human nature and have a vague sense of what that is, because we're not going to have like an exact sense because everybody's different. But this vague sense of human nature that I think is that most of our ancestors would have recognized as well. I think that that's where you can have some kind of harmony in human flourishing.
You actually predicted my next question because I wrote, do you actually believe this, or is it that men could use a bit of this attitude given how enfeebled they are? So what I was writing there was, I was listening to your More Complete Beast and I was thinking, this is perhaps provocative, and it's a little bit about inspiring men to be a bit more bold and, do what you want to each an extent. And yeah, I thought maybe you didn't literally mean it in all cases, but in this society now, we could use a bit of that impulse was how I took it, which is almost exactly what you've just said there. It's like
men are. People always say that men aren't romantics, but men are the most romantic creatures in the world. In fact, yeah, like romances were really just stories about knights on horses, right? In the romans, that's the etymology of it. They were the novels of adventure stories for men. Men are romantics by heart, and we need a beautiful idea. And so, yeah, if everything's going in that direction, yeah, you need to throw a more beautiful idea in this direction. And reality and wisdom is always somewhere in the middle. You always find what really works somewhere in the middle, but you have to throw something out this way to counter the other way within reason. I'm we're both on Twitter, X, and the endless streams of hot takes of people just saying crazy things to see what they can say. I'm not a big fan of that at all. I think you should say things that you actually believe. And what I talked about were really actually, I think, beautiful ideas. But whether is every person going to reach, that pinnacle or that, all along the way, or are they going to settle somewhere in the middle? Probably. What that book really honestly was about, and I think is really, really important more today even than when I wrote it, is that the idea of resentment in men who are, let's say, conservative or right wing or whatever you want to call that, because I don't think any of the labels really mean anything. But the men who are not, say, in the liberal establishment or the far left or whatever, what you see is them taking on a victim mentality, in the sense that, like, because they're outnumbered, and they're the ones who are being told that they're always bad people, and that no matter what they do, they're always oppressors, and that they're always like they're terrible human beings, and it's like an original sin doctrine to a certain extent. Like, no matter what you do, you're always bad. And I was seeing that victimization sense rise up, and the point where they're just complaining about what those other people are doing, and they're not doing anything themselves. And what A More Complete Beast as a book was actually really trying to do, and I think we need it now more than ever, is to get these guys to step beyond that resentment, that idea that, like, these leftist meanies with blue hair are controlling my life and I'm mad about it, to a place of creation. Like, well, these leftists and so forth, they have a dream of the future. It's a crazy future, but they have a dream of what the future should look like. What's your dream? Where do you want to go? And that's what I really think that was what I was trying to get across in that book. Like, a noble man is a creator. Is like don't just be a mirror of the bad things that you don't like. Be yourself and have your own vision and, like, look forward, because the people who have the vision of the future are the people that win the future generally.
Yeah, Tanner Guzy made a very similar point on this podcast, to be honest, possibly inspired by you. And he said, we're not building things, and we're complaining and doing memes and stuff. And one thinks of that meme. What is the meme? It's something like, imagine if it was the other way around, where a lot of the right just complain. A classic example, as we record, is that yesterday, as we record, there was Rashida Tlaib seemed to be leading some sort of riot in the Capitol or protest in somewhere in Washington. And people were looking at it going, well, isn't this like Jan 6? I mean, I'm sure they'll go to jail for 22 years. And then other people like Aaron McIntyre, however you say his name, was kind of making jokes about it. Like, we're really just going to keep saying, well, imagine it was the other way around. It's like, yes, it's not fair. They hate us. You are if you're a conservative American, you are oppressed. Congratulations. Now what are you going to do, sort of thing?
Exactly. Because it gets tired. I mean, I've been watching this play out for the last 10 or 12 years. And the well, if we did that, it would be totally different. Like, well, that's, yeah. Congratulations, you figured that out. Okay, well, now, what is your vision for the future? You can't just be mad about what other people doing or like what Hollywood's doing. Like, if you don't like the movies they're making, make some movies. You have all these conservative influencers. They have millions and millions of dollars. Like, make some movies. Like do something, create something rather than just asking. Like being mad that these other people who believe totally different things are making things about what they actually believe. Like, you need to do the work yourself. And unfortunately, I think conservatives or whatever you're going to call it are a little bit behind on that. And like you said, Tanner said something very similar and something you just put out on Instagram. And that's Tanner and I are good friends, and these are some of the area we're very different. I mean, he's a Mormon and I'm not, but we have a big overlap in certain areas, and that's one of them that we believe that creation is really, really important to moving things forward into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And people are doing it a little bit now, to be very fair. Daily Wire have just launched, they've relaunched their kids channel, they've renamed it, and it's going to be just directly compete with Disney. They've got their own Snow White coming out, so they're trying to do that. And I suppose in this country we have GB News, which is criticised, and it's not perfect, and we've got Ofcom regulating it, but people are now more and more trying to do this, and we have to do this. And I think I'm surprised we're so far behind in the arts. It's really just because they're captured by the left. We had the Friends of Abe in Hollywood, where if you were conservative, you had to secretly have a secret gang called the Friends of Abe. I mean, it's insane to even think about that. But I always claim that the hero's journey is inherently conservative, or it's certainly much closer to conservatism. It's based in reality. Often it's based in a man struggling and failing, and then he overcomes. Any Clint Eastwood film. I was watching Warrior again the other day, or Star Wars, even as Jungian archetypes. It's certainly not a leftist vision, and whenever they try and impose that, it's usually an awful movie. So it's strange that we're so far behind in movies and arts and things like that. It's probably just because the left they have all the money basically, and the studios.
Well, also to be fair. And yes, obviously they're imposing their own vision on certain things, and the heroic stories they aren't even conservative. Again, they're just human. Like they're ancient. You can't put them even in a modern political construct. They're ancient. Right. They're part of what being a human means is a man on a story to stop chaos. But because what men want to do is actually create and save order, and that's the big story that is all of human history. And I think one of the reasons that they're also behind is that what happened, I think, in America, and maybe it spread, but not as far. It didn't spread as much, I think, to England and Australia, because we import your guys to play our heroes. All the heroic actors who play the big American movies are either like Australian or English, because at least you guys were allowed to go to acting class and like drama class, and it was still okay. I think in America, like America has such these kind of Protestant puritanical roots in its culture that they associate masculinity with like can't do anything creative at all, and there's nothing, you can't be anywhere near the arts, and so I think that anyone who was rebelling in some way against that is going to go into the arts, and then they're obviously more funneled towards different values. And I think that the Americans in their conservative communities or whatever did a really bad job of fostering creativity. So they really have themselves to blame. It's like if you punish every guy who wants to take a theater class and say that he's probably gay and he's a sinner and whatever, well then guess what? You're not going to have any theater. Like you need that element in your society in some way, in a positive way rather than a negative way. And unfortunately, they pushed all those guys out. And then they just became subversive, and because that's what happens. You say we don't want you in your community, you become subversive to that community, and that's what happens. And that's happened, I think, more in America maybe than Britain and Australia, because like I said, you guys at least still perform Shakespeare and stuff. Like their actors actually do some of that still. But and so to have the gravitas to go on stage and give a band of brothers speech. There aren't many American men who can do that.
True. One of them is Kevin Spacey, who just came back and did that at a Roger Scruton lecture, but he's been cancelled despite being exonerated in all courts. Another attack on men we could go into.
Yeah.
But Yeah. And is this what you mean by start the world, which is kind of one of your catchphrases? You mean we have to start creating our own things?
Absolutely. You know, that was a funny quote, and it came actually from, I think, Peter Fonda. Years ago, he made a very, very contentious, strange statement at the Cannes Film Festival. Like, I don't think we should say stop things. I think we should say let's start something. Let's start the world. And I incorporated it into my book, and it's just become my slogan. He's dead. I took it over as my slogan, and I've been using it for years, and it really became really what I'm about. Very much in harmony with what I believe. Is that, yeah, you can't just say no. And that's a big problem with conservatives. They're just like, no, no, no. And we're at a place in a time in history where we need people who are saying yes to something, not people who are saying no to everything. You need, like I said, you need a positive vision. And we need many positive visions. That could be an exciting time for the world. I mean, like, there's a thing that I'm creating, the solar idealism, and my group and whatever, and that's not going to be for everybody, and that's fine. Think of how many cool cultures have developed in the world. They don't all have to be for everybody. But you can, start something that you believe in is better than, trying to stop somebody else's thing. So start your own, start your own world, your own values, your own, environment. Control what you can. What do you think is beautiful? Start that. Do something.
Yeah, we've become far too reactive, and we need to start our own things. And I was also thinking, though, about when you talked about tribes and how we're only accountable to our own tribe. I was thinking, we do have our own things, and I've got 2 podcasts, and a lot of people listen, and we've got GB News and so on. And I've got my own tribe, and I don't actually care what leftists think at all. And I think their philosophy is entirely wrong on all levels, and I don't think it's valid even one bit. And yet they can still attack me. The only problem with that, they can attack and try and destroy my thing all the time, which they do. They try and this is cancel culture. So that's quite interesting. It's like you've got your own tribe, you don't care about the other tribe, but they will assault your tribe.
Yeah, I mean that's how reality works. Unfortunately, I've obviously been the target of that as well over the years, that is what it is. And yeah, the temptation is that with that, as I said, is to become is resentment. Like, oh, they're always out to get me, and it's true, they are out to get. So sometimes it's not paranoia. Sometimes they really are out to get you. At the same time, the best thing that you can do is to not lose your focus and to keep moving forward and creating something rather than to be constantly scared and reacting. And that's a speech I have to give myself. Because we're all aware of the consequences of things like that. But I think the best thing that you can do is to keep creating and to keep moving forward and to keep, you shouldn't be afraid to change what you believe in. I've certainly changed certain things that I believed in over the past 10 years. But you have to keep moving forward in the way that you think is right, rather than just trying to stop everybody else or trying to be defensive all the time. Because defensive games are not like the best games to play generally.
Yeah, and you've mentioned your solar idealism a couple of times. What is that? You've talked about being a pagan. Do you still call yourself a pagan? And is that tied in with this solar idealism? Because I'm not up to that part of your work yet, so I'm not sure what that is.
Okay. Well, I started over the years very much as a consequence of the things we've been talking about. And especially the darkness that was happening in 2020 and so forth. And the tendency of men to just be angry and to fester in anger. I started a slogan called Stay Solar. And it was basically to think about what the idea of the sun is, like what the sun is and what it does. And that's really what men want to be in the world around them. That's what a good man is, to a certain extent. It's like, the sun actually has gravity, pulls things into its orbit, and actually nourishes and helps them all. It brings light and nourishment to all of them. And it has so much energy, he can afford to give that to the people around him. And so this kind of expansive mentality, I think that's what you see in great men, whether they're leaders of companies or countries or conquerors or whatever. They have so much energy that they can give it to other people. And so I thought that was a really good, and I wrote an essay called Stay Solar, and I thought that was a really good starting point for a positive culture. And so I've developed that into a philosophy called solar idealism. And that basically, it kind of reworks these Jungian archetypes by looking at religions and how they've evolved over the centuries, and what are the same repeated themes? So I talk about, there's always a father in the sky, and what are the qualities of the father, and what does he always do? And it's very similar to like a Christian or Judaic God, because that was part of they're all father gods, they're all father sky gods, and they have very similar powers and ideas and functions in the universe. And then like there's always a warrior figure. And what are they associated with? Whether it's Thor or Marduk or whatever, they're always associated with the same kind of things. They're always storm gods who have lightning who kill dragons. I mean, that's a human constant. It's been around for a really long time. We found some of it in Native American stuff really recently, which was really cool. So it's, let's as men focus on this idea of being more like the sun, and then look at these archetypes of idealized masculinity. But what is the perfect version? I think that gods really to men are the perfect versions of what they could be. They're like, here's what I would be if I was turned up to an 11. And we're never going to get turned up. We're never going to be perfect. But I think that the gods of men generally have been like these reflections of themselves. So what are the perfect versions of us, and how can we get closer to that? Is what my philosophy really is. That's what solar idealism is, and I've been working on it and developing it. And I have a buddy of mine who's really good at philosophy, who's kind of like fleshing it out in that sense. And we have some experts on different things in our group that are building it out in different ways. But that's my focus these days is building that, because again, I'm trying to start something. I want to start something rather than just saying you should start something. I have to start something too. I have to do what I'm telling people to do. So I'm trying to start something that represents what my beliefs actually are.
Very cool. Yeah, it's very cool just to have your own philosophy that you've fully developed. Because when you think about it, something like objectivism is pretty big. It was just started by some chick. It was Ayn Rand just wrote this, and now like all kinds of people around the world follow it. And it's just, I suppose you could cite Scientology. There's any number of things you could cite. So you're just coming up with your own philosophy. Yeah, I haven't really thought about doing that. I mean, so that's really interesting. And so I need to read that essay. So it's Stay Solar. Is this on your website or something?
Yeah, Stay Solar is the essay, and you can find that pretty easily. And then my book Fire in the Dark is really the big form of that. Okay. And then there's things. Well, what is solar idealism in it? And I've actually have some YouTube videos. I have a YouTube channel for the Order of Fire. That's pretty new that I've just been working on with my guys, and we do podcasts and stuff like that. And I did a what is solar idealism explainer video that's like maybe 15 minutes long. Okay. So that's kind of me talking about it in a slightly longer form, and I worked really hard on that and just got that out a few weeks ago.
Very interesting. Might not be for some of our Christian listeners, but solar idealism, very interesting. And I've seen you on Instagram out in the desert with a bunch of blokes. What's all that about? Is that what you do? You go out and do sort of rituals? Yeah,
well, it's like, what our foundational ritual, the foundational idea of the Order of Fire is that, at some point in every society, at some point, there's men who break away and start their own thing. Whether it's ancient Rome or whatever, there's a small group of guys go over here and start their own thing. And so we use the fire as a metaphor. Fire does the same thing as the sun. I mean, if you see what a fire does, it provides light and warmth, and it becomes a point of orientation in the world. Okay, well, that's our campsite. That's home. It creates a sense of home, like right where as soon as you make it. And then people revolve around it, kind of gravitate towards it. If you've ever had a campfire, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, the first time we went out as a group, we did that symbolically. We actually hiked out 4 hours into the desert and built a fire. And, I conducted a ritual because I've done that in the past and I have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. And we conducted a ritual and in the sense of like, here, we're laying down this fire. These are our values. This is what we actually mean. We're creating order in our own world is what the function of that ritual really is. It's very symbolic, and for some of the guys, it's connected to something bigger, and for some of the guys, it's just it's symbols, and so we kind of leave that open ended. But men, never underestimate the fact that men want to go out into the woods and scream. If there's one thing I've learned in life, it is that in conducting rituals is that men want to go out in the woods and shout things. There's just something about that, whether it's the woods or the desert or whatever. I think that there's a real desire of men to do that and to do it in a way that it's not all touchy-feely, because there's that too. You can find that out there, but we try to do it in a really strength-based way. and that is consistent with the rest of our philosophy. And so that's been really cool to do that. We did it in the desert in Arizona here. I've had guys, I gave them the script that I use, and they've done it in Australia and Canada. We did it again in Nevada recently, and next week I am flying to Ireland and doing it there, which is going to be really cool because I've never done it in another country so far. So I'll be meet my Irish guys, and we're going to do it there. So I'm excited about that. Again, start a new fire, start the new world, build something bigger that hopefully will like extend beyond myself.
Awesome. Yeah, you might have to plan for rain for the Irish version. It might be slightly less solar, but
yeah, I believe he said we might see the sun. Paul is our Irish guy, and he's a good sense of humor. So
that's funny. Yeah, because you're in Arizona, so there's no shortage of solar energy, but it might not be the same over here or in Ireland. Sure. But that is cool. Yeah, you're right. Screaming, it is frowned upon if you scream and punch stuff in the office. I've noticed it's better to go out to the woods. And, it looks like a kind of fight club in the desert. Not to mock it, because I'm just having a laugh. But it looks like a cool thing. And actually, you were praised by the author of Fight Club, weren't you, Chuck?
Yeah, it was really cool. It was honestly, I saw Fight Club in the theater like 7 times when it came out. It did definitely influence my life. I was working at a PR firm in San Francisco at the time, and so I kind of was the main character. And I was like. It was part of the thing that sparked, what am I missing? And I don't necessarily reach the same conclusions that he did or whatever, but went on my own path for sure. But yeah, it was wild. Years later, I had this tattoo shop, and Chuck came over, wanted to meet me. And I think he interviewed me like kind of as a character study for maybe some things that he was working on. Because I'm a little bit of an interesting character. And so I met him once, and then we had lunch again after that. And then every once in a while, I'll send him an email, and he'll get back to me. Like I don't try to bug him. He has a lot of stuff that he's doing, and he gets hassled a lot for ever having been in the same room with me because I'm a bad man. But he's definitely a brilliant guy, and it was really cool to meet him and have that come full circle. And he made some cool suggestions that I've incorporated into my own things over time. And I actually messaged him during 2020. It was funny because when all the lockdowns were happening and whatever, there were people going to jiu-jitsu in secret. And I was one of them. Like we have to sneak in the back door and change like there, and no one could know that we were going to the jiu-jitsu place. And it was like, you don't tell anyone this is open. This like. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. And I was like, dude, it's really happening. Like I just sent him an email like, Fight Club is actually happening right now. And he got back to me and he liked that. It was real. It's a cool thing to see.
That is hilarious. And that is very real. I mean, I watched Fight Club at school. It was a really important movie when it came out, mind-blowing. But it was very much a movie. You didn't really think it was going to happen. I watched it again recently. It was a touch more black-pilled than I even remembered. But it was a very important movie. But yeah, like you say, now it's actually happening. The world's sufficiently messed up that we're going out and doing our own little fight clubs, especially during lockdown. Yeah, the first rule of lockdown jiu-jitsu club. That is funny. That's where we're at. Wow. Yeah. And are you doing any of this stuff in the UK then? Or is Ireland, as in England, or is Britain, is Ireland the closest you're getting? Do you have like groups around the world? Other than the ones
we do have groups around the world. It's just, it's a strange and new thing, that I came up with. So like, it's hard to get everybody on the exact same page. So we take applications, and I'm like, I can kind of tell if we're on the same page or not. So it takes a while. But no, the guys who are meeting in Ireland, one of them's from Sweden, and I think one of them's from the UK, and then one of them's actually Polish, but he lives in Ireland right now. So and the Irish guy, I think the guys we have coming out, we might have a few more. But yeah, like I said, we have a really active group in Canada, a really active group in Australia, and a guy in Guatemala. It just depends who applies and so forth, and who works out over time. But yeah, our European group has been really cool. Our guy in Sweden actually makes fantastic music because we're trying to create culture and art. And I did a project, and you can find it on my YouTube actually, or my Instagram. I mean, not my Instagram, but my X. It's at the top there. It's called Invocation of the Storm. and it's kind of my reinterpretation of myth to be our part of our mythology that we're creating. And I think a ballsy move for me. I think I do good Maximus speeches, like in my book. The way I narrate, it has a certain tone to it, and I was like, can I do that for real? Can I do a scene? And so I actually had this guy score it as if it was a movie, and then went and shot it in a soundstage and did it as a scene. And I think it came out pretty well. I edited the whole thing myself. It was a really cool creative project to work on. And I'd like to do more things like that in the future. Like, can we bring these things to life, these ideas? And so, yeah, but the guy from Sweden is the guy who did the music for that. So we have a lot of collaboration happening, and a lot more on the way.
Well, very cool that you're walking the walk and actually creating stuff, and and there's definitely a desire for it, for masculine groups and for just creativity on our side that isn't lame. So, and yeah, I can confirm the books are really well read, very, very interesting the way you read them. It makes it a whole experience on the Audible. In one of them, you've even got sound effects in Becoming a Barbarian as well, and stuff like that.
I think so. I think there are a couple of sound effects. I went a little over the top of that one, but I think my books are written as if I'm giving a speech, so that the Audibles are actually a really good way to listen to them.
Yeah, so check out the Audible books for Way of Men and all his Jack's other books. Highly recommended. Even if you don't agree with all the ideas, just definitely a great experience and some great passages of writing. I haven't even mentioned, like, the Bonobo Masturbation Society is one of the great chapters in literature in The Way of Men. I haven't even mentioned it, but I just was listening to this thinking this is brilliant. Even just, as literature. So check that out. And where else can people find you, Jack? I know you've got to go. Where else is good to find you?
Well, I didn't start X until Elon Musk bought it, because I just figured I'd get canceled, so I didn't even bother. So I'm on X at PH2T3R. My name was taken, so the PH2T3R is Pater, like father. So that's what I use on that platform. Instagram, I'm at Start the World, and there's also an Instagram for the Order of Fire, and you can find me on YouTube, at Jack Donovan. But there's also an Order of Fire YouTube channel, which is where I'm really doing podcasting and stuff now. I've done things in the past under Jack Donovan, but I'm really kind of invested in this Order of Fire right now. So we're doing a lot of, we'll have podcasts on what is goodness, and like a group discussions on what is goodness and what is magic and things like that. So it's very philosophical, and I'm proud of the discussions that we're having. I think they're very interesting.
All right. Well, brilliant episode. Thanks so much for doing it. And and good luck with all that. And thanks for doing the show.
All right. No problem.
All right. That was Jack Donovan. Fascinating episode, I thought. I'm a Christian, obviously, but I don't mind a bit of pagan chat. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. And if you did, check out his books on Audible. I definitely recommend them. And if you want to support the podcast, go to buymeacoffee.com/Nick Dixon. Buy me a digital coffee. Leave a comment. I reply to them all. Or you can go to nickdixon.substack.com and subscribe to my Substack for £5 a month. So help us keep the lights on and support the current thing. Buymeacoffee.com/Nick Dixon, nickdixon.substack.com, and we'll see you again next week.